Leafs Converse, Hockey World, what's up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. My name is Norman James. I hope you're ready for a new episode. Michael Piagello is standing by. He was there to witness the 3-1 Leafs win over the Vegas Golden Knights at Scotiabank Arena on Monday. Those Maple brothers have won 2 straight now, 10-5 on the season, 1 goal against in their past 2 games. Are they onto something? I have a feeling Mr. Agello thinks his glass is still half empty. We'll get into that game. We'll talk about William Nylander. We'll talk about Morgan Rielly, Mitch Marner. I go off a little bit, but you know, it's all love. Mike's ready to go. I know you are too. So what do you say? Let's POD. The Leafs Convo starts right now. And here he is, my podcast partner in crime, the one and only Michael Piagello. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Norman. How are you?
Not too bad. Feeling good about the Maple Leafs' recent victory, a 3-1 win over the reigning Western Conference Stanley Cup finalists, the Vegas Golden Knights, 3-1 at Scotiabank Arena. That nice little empty netter from Nazem Kadri. I was telling my wife, if Nazem Kadri gets the puck and there's an empty net, he's going to shoot it from anywhere because that cat loves to score.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously I was in the press box for most of the game, but normally reporters go down to the media room for the last 5 or 6 minutes of regulation and if there's overtime. And yesterday, because of the Eric Hall injury, and I didn't know that the medical area that they treat injured players is close to the media room, all the media were cut off from the media room to watch the game, and we really didn't have access to anything in terms of seeing what was going on until the crowd cheered when Kadri scored the empty netter. So I was sort of out of touch there for that last 4 or 5 minutes of regulation.
They were outshot, but they were up 2-0. Vegas made it a game, 2-1. Got tense there for a little bit, but you know, that's how the Leafs. That's how you want a team to win games, when it's the 9-7s or the 5-0s. Those kinds of wins can be exhilarating and they're lots of fun, but they're not sustainable ways of earning victories. These 3-1 games, however, you can do that all day if you keep composed and you stay to the game plan, right?
Well, I mean, the Leafs did things that they talked about after the morning skate. They accomplished what they wanted to do. They wanted to score the first goal. They knew that they were undefeated when they scored the first goal, and they did that with Connor Brown's goal. But if you look now it's a stretch of 6 games where they haven't scored over 3 goals at home. They're averaging just over 2 goals per game on home ice. They're under 500 now, 4-5. They relied heavily on Frederik Andersen to save their bacon, I'd say in the second half of the game. So Mike Babcock, I'm sure, is taking the 2 points, and he's very happy with the victory. But still, this team, the way they play on the road and the way they play at home are completely different, and it's inexplicable because they've been scoring at a ridiculous pace on the road, and they just can't seem to put it all together in terms of their offense at home.
This is the Leafs Convo, Norman James with Mike Agello. One of our recent podcasts, a tribute to Morgan Rielly and a lamentation, even if I don't even know if that's a word, a lamenting of the William Nylander situation, which we will continue to do here in the next few minutes. Mike, the Leafs are 10-5. You're going to have seasons where your home record's outstanding. Your road record is 500. They're amazing on the road. They're just below 500 at home. I'd like to think that there'll be a few games over that when all is said and done. Are we splitting hairs here, Mike? Or are you concerned that any hiccups that continue for a prolonged period at Scotiabank Arena in all likelihood, will spill over into whatever playoff run the Leafs aspire to put together?
I mean, I think that it's attracting attention because it's so unusual, and that's why it's curious. If it was the exact opposite, if the Leafs were 6-0 at home and 4-5 on the road, I think everybody would say that's about right. If you go 500 on the road and 750 at home, you're a playoff team. But 6-0 on the road and playing as well as they have, and playing, their offenses has no problems generating scoring chances, but at home they seem to either miss the mark, hit the post, hit the crossbar, or hold on to the puck too long. It's weird. Now it'll probably sort itself out, and they'll get over 500 and they'll earn their points at home, and they're obviously not going to stay undefeated on the road. But I think it's just curious that, a team that did so well at home last year, set records for their home record, is struggling out of the box. And that, it's not just that Austin Matthews is not there, because the struggles were happening while he was still in the lineup.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. We can discuss the Maple Leafs performance for as long as we want to, and I'm not so sure we'll ever come to a total consensus. But where I think there should be an abundance of agreement is the play of Mitch Marner has been outstanding this season, and really should be to no one's surprise.
Yeah, I mean, as happened last year, and I'm probably gonna write something in the next few days about this, because it's clear that when Matthews is out, Marner last year and this year has stepped up. Remember, Matthews was out in the second half with the shoulder injury, and I think it was the concussion I think it was in December. So he was out, I believe it was around 25 games. That coincides with Marner sort of awakening from his first half slumber, where I think he only scored 2 goals, and then he ended up with over 20. So when Matthews was out, Marner stepped up and eventually led the team in scoring. And this year, he's leading the team in scoring with 19 points. And with Matthews out, his role, his responsibilities as a centerpiece have grown again. So, he is somebody that they can depend on even when other key players are out of the lineup.
Imagine that, being a player you can depend on, Mike. Like, this is Mitch Marner to a T. He's always been an incredible hockey player. His last year in junior, he was the best player in junior hockey, leading the London Knights to an incredible Memorial Cup championship in Red Deer. I was there. I saw it. And he's just a naturally gifted hockey player. More naturally gifted than St. Matthews. More naturally gifted than the statistic wonder boy, William Nylander, who's somewhere in Europe, we think. Will he be, is he all around better than these guys? I don't know. But he naturally, for sure, he is. And this is a guy who's using physical tools that aren't of equal level to a lot of his counterparts. This is the Leafs Convo. I'm Norman James with Mike Augello. Thank you so much for your support on all of our podcast platforms. We're on and off the charts for iTunes in the Sports and Rec Canadian zone, and that particular chart. It's not a big deal, considering we're not at the level of a lot of the bigger Leafs podcasts, but for us, considering we split our time between YouTube as well as podcast platforms, most of them of your choice, it does show that we are growing, and we couldn't grow without you. Michael, the Leafs have New Jersey coming up. Is there any concern in terms of, if the Leafs don't start locking in here, that they're going to be exploited? Or do you feel like the Leafs, even without Matthews, even without Nylander, even with Jake Gardner's head not screwed on totally straight and tight, you notice how I took the Gardner dig in there? Do you feel like the Leafs can still find a way to get these games to 2 points in their favor?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend on, and I think we have to acknowledge that Frederik Andersen has been a big component of this team's success through the first month of the season. Remember, this is a guy who the first 2 years in Toronto struggled in October. That didn't happen this year. Now the record, I think he was 7-5 going into yesterday, so now 8-5. And he's played 8 straight games. Garrett Sparks hasn't played a game since October 13th. He has faced a lot of shots. He has been equal to the task. They've gotten good goaltending on almost every night, and he's been a backstop for the team. I know that Mitch Marner in the post-game comments was talking about, how responsible Andersen was for the success of the team. He even compared it to the way Tyler Parsons was responsible for the success of the London Knights when they won the Memorial Cup. So, I mean, goaltending is extremely important to this team, especially with their defense being, I think, still a bit questionable and missing some key offensive pieces. And they need Anderson to maintain that, but they also need to start, getting the backup goaltender in there. And New Jersey, they play New Jersey on Friday and Boston on Saturday in Boston, back to back. That'll be the first time in almost a month that Garrett Sparks, because he'll play one of the games, plays. And, the concerns about the backup goaltending haven't really reared their head because Anderson's played all the games. But now that Sparks will probably start getting some action, we still have to see whether he is a true backup or not, or that's going to be a concern going forward.
I think he's a starter somewhere at some point in his career if he ascends the right way, but he's not just going to be handed a starter's job. He's going to have to earn his stripes as a backup first. When you compare him to somebody like Curtis McElhinney or Calvin Pickard, these guys, sure, they could be the starter for a while, but the expectation is that these guys are perfect to offset the incumbent. I feel like Garrett Sparks has more in him than that, but he certainly doesn't have more in him than Freddie Anderson does right now, and the Leafs will tell you that all day. In the same way that we can put Nylander in one corner and Marner in the other, if William Nylander was a damn priority for the Maple Leafs, if he was their star, their go-to guy, they would have paid him already. Okay, I don't care what his zone exits or zone entries or his 5-on-5 numbers are. If that guy were considered greater than what Mitch Marner is going to be, he would have been paid already. Let's get into let's get into William Nylander, Michael. Scouts at the game. I know you got the inside from them. I know you're sitting down with them, and I know you're getting all the details from the scouts. But clearly, scouts are trying to figure out what's going on with the Maple Leafs right now. What's the next shoe to drop on the Nylander impasse? Do you have any information on this?
Well, I think, first the external and then the internal. I think it was interesting, and Elliot Friedman on a Calgary radio station on Monday was discussing the Nylander situation and said, the Leafs want to sign him, they like him, but they may be coming to the realization that they can't, and that's based on where his camp still is, where there's been no softening of their position in terms of what they're asking for on a bridge deal or on a long-term deal. And the Leafs, this is the thing. I know that there's a lot of people out there saying, well, just give them the $7 million. The Leafs cannot afford to capitulate to Nylander's camp's demands for anything outside of what they've determined he is worth. If they do that, they open the door on Marner to being pushed around next year by Darren Ferris, his agent, or by Judd Moldaver, who is Austin Matthews' agent. This has ramifications going past Nylander. And if they don't think Nylander is worth more than, say, David Pastrnak, who's got 12 goals this year, who signed for $6.6 million. Now you have to factor in inflation and the cap going up, but if they determine that Nylander has not earned $7 million a year or $7 million plus, then they cannot come off their stance. Otherwise, again, they open themselves up to more problems down the road with players that they probably deem more important, Matthews and Marner. So I don't think that there's going to be any flexibility there until maybe the 11th hour, but I get the feeling that there's going to be a resolution to this one way or the other way before December the 1st. Now, last night, Rick Dudley was there again, the assistant GM of the Carolina Hurricanes. That's 5 times in the last couple weeks. Everybody, Elliot Friedman, Darren Drager, Pierre LeBrun, are all saying Carolina is interested. It's just that the Leafs at this point are still holding out hope that they can get Nylander to agree to a contract. But if all of a sudden they decide to put him on the market, so to speak, Carolina would step up. They're very interested. The other teams that were there in terms of multiple scouts, Arizona, which if you think about it, they have a lot of cap room. They're looking for scoring. They're playing actually pretty good, decent defense this year. Their goals against is great. Antti Ranta is having a good year, but offensively, they're still not a developed team. Tampa Bay had a couple representatives there, and I know that Friedman said that there were a Leaf scout was in Tampa the last 3 games, but that could simply be the fact that Tampa is a division rival that they haven't played, so they're simply just scouting each other for upcoming games. But you never know. I mean, Tampa is a very inventive team and very deep team in terms of prospects and players. And the other one was Anaheim, and it was sort of stealthy because they had one scout in the press box, and apparently, according to David Pagnotta, the 4th period, Bob Murray, the Ducks GM, was sitting in the crowd, probably not to attract attention. So Anaheim is they're a team that has the right combination of forwards and young defense, that if they were interested in Nylander, they could put together a package that the Leafs would be interested in, and that would benefit both teams. But again, it depends on whether the Leafs truly want to trade Nylander, if they're not getting the offers that they think are worthy of trading him. And there are some people who think that they could keep him past December the 1st and just wait until next year. I think that would be dumb, but I understand it from the point of Kyle Dubas. If you're not getting offers that you think are worthwhile, then you can't sell them for 50 cents on the dollar. That's something that Peter Chiarelli did with Taylor Hall for Adam Larson. If you think you're better off waiting and trying to get him signed next year, or waiting and trying to trade him at the draft or something like that, that might be the way that things go. But it's still very much in motion.
The problem with the metric people and those who obsess over the salary cap is that they're not taking into account the human element to this all. The humans make up the numbers, right? They're the ones who decide what is going to be happening, whether it's somebody's play, influences the numbers that a player of skill that is, at the same level would be getting on another team, or in a lot of ways. What I'm saying is the human element is key here, because it's not like, well, let's wait a year to get our numbers right and everything will be okay. This guy hasn't played in the NHL for a year.
Right.
The father can't trust Dubas. The father is the main figure in the life of the player, who has had to, find a rink in Stockholm to skate on, while the team that drafted him goes on a Stanley Cup run. Now he comes back for the money that is a little bit more digestible from his team's perspective and from the, where the Leafs are coming from, and all is fine and dandy. No, it's not just about the numbers. There's more to it than that. And that's the problem. The deeper this goes, the deeper the divisions, the deeper the cuts. People have to understand that. We live in this social media age where everything's just on Twitter, and everybody thinks they understand, and a tweet can solve it, or money can solve it. At this point, what can the Leafs give William Nylander that he'd be totally satisfied with? Well, nothing. You have to capitulate.
This is the thing, and a couple interesting things that I had just overheard listening to Gord Miller from TSN, and I think they're very valid points. One, a lot of people in the analytics community believe Nylander is better than Marner. Well, we already said that Marner has stepped up when Matthews has been hurt in 2 instances so far. Nylander last year, when Matthews was out, so that was 20 games, he played with Patrick Marleau stepping in for Matthews up the middle, and then later in the year, when Matthews is out with the shoulder injury, he moved to center between Connor Brown and Zach Hyman. In those instances, 20 games, he scored 3 goals. So there are the numbers for you in terms of him being effective without Matthews.
Michael, the analytics crowd thought Mikhail Grabovski and Nikolai Kulemin were the second coming, and that Tyler Bozak was a piece of trash. Tyler Bozak's career is continuing in the NHL. Where are the other 2 guys? Again, it's not just about your this narrow statistical imprint. His zone entries and his zone exits are better. Marner gets all of his points on the power play because he's put in a position of being of an advantage. Nylander's numbers 5-on-5 are better. So that's the reason why he's a better hockey player than Mitch Marner? You can't just elevate one player to a high status and reduce another over that. It.
You can use numbers, or you can be a slave to numbers, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I think certain numbers say something, but if you're a slave to them, then you sort of lose the overall picture. And now the other thing that Miller said, and I thought this was very interesting, he had spoken to an NHL GM, and he asked him, would you pay William Nylander $8 million a year? Not talking about would you do it for the Leafs? Would you do it for your team? And he said, no. Would you pay him $7 million? No. Now that this is the situation. If this impasse continues for the next couple weeks, and Nylander is his camp is free to talk to other teams. If they're talking to other teams and other teams are not saying, if we trade for you, we'll give you this, and they know that they can't get more than they're asking for from the Leafs, that might finally come to the realization in terms of Louis Gross and Michael Nylander that they're barking up the wrong tree here. If nobody else will step up and sign him for $7 or $7.5 or $8 million, then they know that they're asking for too much. But I mean, that's the question. What will they capitulate? Will they come back to reality as they get closer to December 1st, or do the Leafs just basically think they're never going to come off this stance and we have to trade them and get the best deal that we can? That's where it stands right now.
Isn't it ironic, Mike? The poster child for analytics, in this case, Kyle Dubas, is not a slave to the numbers. Isn't it ironic? The guy that all the metric people were pushing as the general manager because he's the boy wonder, he's the omniscient one, he's the chosen one, and Mark Hunter's stupid and hasn't accomplished anything, is now the one putting his foot down over numbers, saying, you know what? I don't care about this narrow vision of statistics that you are using to gin up your position. There's more to it than that. If Kyle Dubas was a total slave to numbers,
right,
William Nylander would be paid $15 million a year and have the C. He's not. He's not that guy. I'd like to know from people who are just totally driven by numbers, and these are the people who probably think Jake Gardiner is better than Morgan Riley. I guarantee you someone out there thinks that, and they'll have the numbers in their mind to prove it. I'd like to know what the numbers suggested about the Washington Capitals winning the Stanley Cup. Did the numbers that came out of the computer or the IBM or whatever the hell they're using to determine who's doing what and who's worth what and who's not, did your numbers tell you that the Washington Capitals were going to win the Stanley Cup last year? No, they didn't.
One of the questions that we had asked from people, that there was one that asked about the situation with, are the Leafs purposely sort of holding on with this Nylander situation? Because if they sign him to a long-term extension and sign him for, say, $7 million, the sort of the quirk would be a front-loaded deal for the first year, which would be more than $7 million, and then the cap hit would be less than that. And are the Leafs sort of manipulating this so the cap hit going forward will be less? I don't think that's the case, because I think there's not significant difference between now and December 1st in the numbers. And second of all, I mean, it's clever, and I think Kyle Dubas and Brandon Pridham are very, very clever. They, again, even if they manipulate the numbers, that paying him over $7 million would be, in the minds of most people, a loss, a capitulation to Nylander and his demands. And again, they cannot allow that to happen.
Yeah, there's business to take care of going forward. And I like the Maple Leafs over a particular Leaf. I know that's hard for some fans to get their heads around, but it's about the team winning an effing Stanley Cup. It's not about paying your favorite player all the money he wants to make you feel good or make him feel good. And here's the thing. William Nylander he's the image we all look at. He's the image we idolize. He's the image that we piss all over during this situation. I'd love to see him come back for the right price. The issue now is, how does he come back? How does he come back and not alienate himself? How does he come back and not alienate his teammates? I know it's all a business, but the longer this goes, the deeper the divisions, the deeper the cuts. And if this is something that is being driven, this issue with the Leafs is being driven by Louis Gross and Michael Nylander, who's a nice guy. I spent considerable time with him out at the Memorial Cup a few years ago. If this division is being deepened and widened because these two believe that, they want to hold the Leafs' feet to the fire, they want to make sure they're preemptive in the money grab over this course of contendership the Leafs have going right now. The victim is William. But if it's William Nylander who feels, is in line with what his management team and his family are seeking, then, I think it's a mistake on all of their parts, and we'll see who reaps the benefit and who reaps what they sow, Michael. Thanks a lot for your time, my friend.
Thanks, Norman.
That's a wrap on this edition of the Leafs Convo podcast. Another collab between Michael Piagello and myself is in the books. What do you think? Let us know. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like, dislike our work, whatever. Just subscribe, please. We need the subscribers. We need the views. That's what it's all about. Jillian McLeod working on her Game Changer series. Kyle Outridge working his ass off on the take on the Marlies. He's doing a fantastic job. Make sure to support their work too, because they are an integral part of what we do here at the Leafs Convo podcast. For Michael P.A., I'm Norman J. We'll talk to you soon. The Leafs Convo is out.